You see, my dear, most of us were raised to believe that life is a kind of journey, a road with signs and milestones. And at the end of it, perhaps a shining reward waiting for us. We think that we must know where we're going, that every step must lead to some grand destination. But have you ever watched the way a tree grows? It has no plan. It simply unfolds. And yet in that effortless unfolding, there is a kind of quiet perfection. You see, we human beings are strange creatures. We try to make life more purposeful than life itself. We imagine that the universe is waiting for us to justify our existence, to prove that we're worthy of the space we take up. But that's rather like the waves in the ocean trying to prove that they belong there. Waves don't ask permission to rise and fall, they simply do. And that, you see, is the wonder of living with no purpose. When you stop chasing after meaning, you begin to feel it everywhere. In the warmth of the sunlight on your skin, in the laughter of a child who doesn't yet know what tomorrow means, in the soft rhythm of your own breath, you discover that existence itself is the purpose. Now, this idea sounds terribly shocking to those who believe that life must be a task, a race, or an achievement. They say, but if I live without purpose, I'll become lazy, I'll drift away. Is a flower lazy because it doesn't know why it blooms? Is a bird aimless because it sings without a reason? You see, that's the beauty of it. Things that live most fully are not trying to live. You see, the more we try to force life into meaning, the more it slips through our fingers. The more we cling to certainty, the less alive we feel. And paradoxically, the moment you stop trying to be someone, you begin to feel the fullness of simply being. Now, imagine for a moment a still lake at dawn, mist drifting above it, a quiet hush over the world. If you look into that lake, the reflection is perfectly clear only when the water is still. But when you disturb it, when you throw a stone, when you stir it with worry and intention, the image shatters. So, to see life as it truly is, you must let the mind be still. And in that stillness, the purpose dissolves, and in its place arises something infinitely more alive presence. The trouble, my dear, is that we've been conditioned to live by comparison. We think that unless we're better than someone, or going somewhere, or becoming something, we are nothing. But life is not a competition, it is a dance. And in a dance, there's no goal. The point is not to reach the end of the floor as fast as possible, but to enjoy every step, every twirl, every note of the music. The point of the dance is the dance. When you live with no purpose, you don't become empty. You become spacious. You don't lose meaning. You find it overflowing in every moment. A leaf falling becomes sacred. A stranger's smile becomes holy. Even your pain, your confusion, your uncertainty, they all begin to shimmer with the strange beauty of being alive. You see, the problem with purpose is that it's always in the future. It tells you one day, when you've achieved this, then you can rest. But the secret is that you were never meant to reach the end, because there is no end. There is only this breath, this moment, this heartbeat, and the universe, playful, mysterious, has been dancing in circles forever. It never tires of the rhythm, never rushes to a conclusion. The stars are not hurrying to finish shining. The river does not struggle to arrive at the sea. And yet, everything finds its place perfectly. Everything belongs, not because it tries, but because it is. Now, some people say, but without purpose, how will we know what to do? And I say, you'll know what to do when the time comes. When the wind blows, the trees don't hold a meeting to decide how to sway. They move as the wind moves them. And in that surrender, there's a grace we've forgotten. You see, to live with no purpose doesn't mean to drift aimlessly. It means to trust the current. It means to realize that you are not separate from the flow. You are the flow. You are the dance of existence. Waves of consciousness rising and falling, each one unique, yet none apart from the sea. There's a quiet humor in this too, because we spend our lives trying to become something more. more spiritual, more successful, more awakened, when all along, the one who tries is the very illusion we're meant to see through. You can't become what you already are, and you are life itself. The sky doesn't try to be blue. The clouds don't try to be white. They simply appear and disappear in a dance of effortless transformation. And if you can live like that, without clutching, without defending, without forcing, you'll begin to notice something extraordinary. A deep ease, a quiet peace. The same peace that you feel when you stop running, not because you've arrived, but because you've realized there was nowhere to go. So, the benefit of living with no purpose isn't that you achieve peace as a reward. It's that you remember peace was never lost. It's here, now, in the space between your breaths, in the sound of this silence, in the gentle awareness that watches your thoughts drift by like clouds. Just imagine if every tree, every wave, every gust of wind needed to justify its existence before it could move. The world would be still, lifeless, but it isn't. It moves in freedom, in play, in pure spontaneity. That's how life intended you to move. Not with effort, but with ease. So stop for a moment. Breathe. Notice the stillness underneath everything. It's been waiting for you to return home, not to a destination, but to the ever-present simplicity of being. You see, my dear, when you start to live without a fixed purpose, something very curious happens. You begin to see that the world itself is playing endlessly, joyfully, and that you are never outside the game. The birds, the tides, the stars, all are moving in effortless participation, not toward an end, but in expression of what they already are. And perhaps that's what you are, too, an expression of the universe, a gesture of the cosmos. Most of our suffering, you see, comes from trying to force life to behave. We demand that it serve our ambitions, fit our plans, make sense according to our preferences. But life is far more intelligent than we imagine. It doesn't need our instructions. The river doesn't ask you where it should go. It already knows the way. And when you learn to trust that flow, you begin to discover a freedom that cannot be found in control. You realize that purpose, the kind you were taught to seek, is a kind of cage. It divides time into before and after, turning the living present into a stepping stone. But the present is not a step, it's the dance floor itself. And the music has been playing all along. There's something so tender about that recognition. To see that you've been running after meaning, when meaning was quietly walking beside you, hand in hand, in every breath, every laugh, every tear. Living with no purpose doesn't mean rejecting responsibility or drifting into apathy. It means realizing that your deepest responsibility is to love, to care, to see arise naturally when you are present. When you're not fixated on why am I here, you begin to see what here actually is. You begin to hear the sound of wind through leaves, to feel the pulse of life moving through you, and then you notice that you are not separate from any of it. You're not standing outside the world observing it. You are the world observing itself. You see, my dear, every time you stop to notice, you are fulfilling the very reason life brought you forth. Awareness is the act of existence recognizing itself. That's all this is, the universe playing a game of hide and seek, pretending not to know itself so that it can rediscover its own face in yours. But the ego, that clever trickster, whispers, no, that can't be enough. It says you must do something important, something lasting. And yet everything that truly matters is fleeting: a kiss, a sunset, a laugh shared with someone you love. They vanish like ripples on a pond, and yet they leave everything changed. There's no permanence to chase, because you, like everything else, are part of this continuous unfolding. You are not a traveler on a road. You are the road itself, forever being walked. And when you see that, you can finally stop searching for the map. This, you see, is the essence of peace. Not the absence of movement, but the absence of resistance. To flow with what is, without demanding that it be otherwise. To laugh at your own seriousness and realize that the universe has always been a magnificent joke. And what a joke it is that you spent so long trying to become what you already were, that you searched the skies for meaning when the stars were shining within you all along. And once you get the humor of it, truly get it, a great ease fills your being. You stop taking yourself so seriously, and in that very moment, you become lighter than air. Now, imagine walking through a forest, the sunlight filtering through the branches, the sound of water somewhere in the distance. There's no rush, no goal, no schedule. Each step is the purpose of walking. Each breath is the purpose of breathing. And for the first time, you feel yourself completely alive, not doing life, but being life. This is what it means to live with no purpose. Not nothingness, but fullness. Because when there's no demand on the moment blossoms. You begin to see the sacred hidden in the ordinary, in the way light falls on a wall, in the silence after laughter, in the gentle beating of your heart. When you give up the question, what am I supposed to be doing? You start to notice what is already being done. Life is breathing you. The universe is dreaming itself as you. And what a magnificent dream it is. And sometimes, when you sit quietly enough, you can almost feel the pulse of that great rhythm. The rhythm that moves galaxies and tides and thoughts alike. It doesn't tell you what to do. It simply invites you to listen, to move as it moves, to rest when it rests. And in that listening, your life begins to play in harmony with all things. So, perhaps the real benefit of living with no purpose is that you begin to live as nature intended, spontaneous, effortless, free. You start to act not because you should, but because the action arises by itself, like laughter when something is truly funny, and that's when your life becomes art. Not a project, but a living poem. You see, the artist doesn't paint to finish. He paints because he loves to move the brush. The dancer doesn't dance to reach the end of the song. She dances because she is the music. And when you live that way, every breath, every moment, every gesture becomes a brushstroke of eternity. Stop for a moment. Notice the silence that holds these words. Notice the awareness that hears them. That awareness is what you are. It needs no purpose, because it is the source of all purposes. And perhaps, my dear, this is the most beautiful realization of all, that there was never anything missing. You don't have to justify your existence. You don't have to prove your worth. You are not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And when you truly see that, you can laugh, a deep, joyous laugh that comes from the belly, because you understand, at last, that you never needed to be anyone else. You are the wave returning to the ocean, the breath returning to silence, the thought returning to stillness. There is no destination, only this eternal now, rising and falling, playing and resting, without purpose, without end. So live, just live. Let life happen through you. Be as the sky wide, untroubled, infinite. Be as the sea moves. There are times in life when you feel as though you have wandered off the map. You look around and nothing seems familiar. The signposts that once guided you are gone. The landmarks that once gave you confidence have vanished, and suddenly you are overcome with a strange disorientation. You may call it confusion, uncertainty, or despair, but beneath all those names is a single experience. You feel lost. To be lost is not simply to lack direction. It is to have once believed you knew where you were going, only to realize that the path has dissolved beneath your feet. And in that moment, everything you trusted begins to tremble. The career you thought would define you feels empty. The relationship you believed would complete you unravels. The ideals you clung to no longer hold weight. You stand in the middle of life's forest and see only trees, stretching endlessly with no clear way forward. At first, this can feel like failure. After all, we are taught from childhood that life is a journey with a clear destination, and that our task is to find the straightest route to that destination. Parents, teachers, leaders, and advertisements all hand us maps. They tell us, study hard, get the right job, marry the right person, accumulate wealth, and you will arrive safely at happiness. But sooner or later, many of us discover that these maps are faulty. They do not match the terrain. We follow them diligently, only to find ourselves in places we never wanted to be. And when the map fails us, we feel lost. Yet perhaps this sense of being lost is not the catastrophe it appears to be. Perhaps it is, in fact, a gift. For the truth is, the map was never the territory. It was only a picture, a sketch, a simplified story. The territory itself is always more vast, more wild, more unpredictable than any map can show. And when the map is torn away, frightening though it may be, we are at last forced to look at the territory with our own eyes. We discover reality directly, without the filter of borrowed instructions. Consider how a traveler might cling desperately to a guidebook, reading every detail and trying to match it to the streets of a city. But one day, the book is lost, and the traveler is forced to wander. At first, there is panic, but then, slowly, the city comes alive. Sights and sounds emerge that the book never mentioned. Hidden alleyways, unexpected encounters, uncharted beauty. What once seemed like disorientation becomes discovery. Being lost is the doorway to truly seeing, and so it may be with your own life. The disorientation you feel is not proof that you have failed, but proof that you are finally meeting reality as it is. You are no longer shielded by the maps of others, no longer protected by the certainty of borrowed truths. You are naked before the mystery, and though it is terrifying, it is also alive. To be lost is to be free of false guidance, free to wander, free to see freshly. Yet notice how hard it is to accept this. The mind clings to certainty like a child clings to a blanket. We would rather have a false map than no map at all. We would rather pretend we know than admit we do not. And so the moment of lostness feels unbearable. But look closer. The discomfort arises not from being lost itself, but from resisting it. The trees are only frightening because you demand a clear path. The silence is only heavy because you insist on constant noise. If you let yourself rest in the lostness, something begins to shift. Have you ever noticed how silence deepens when you stop straining to fill it? At first it is uncomfortable, but then it becomes rich, almost musical. In the same way, lostness becomes meaningful when you stop insisting on certainty. It becomes a vast openness, a space in which anything is possible. What felt like a dead end reveals itself as the edge of a larger horizon. You are not trapped, you are unmoored, and that is a very different thing. Think of a river. We often imagine it as having a single destination, flowing inevitably toward the sea, but along the way it meanders, branches, doubles back, floods and dries. If you stand on its banks at any given moment, you might say, this river is lost. It is wandering aimlessly. But from the larger view, it is simply the river being itself, finding its way through the land as it must. To be lost is only to be seen from too narrow a perspective. From the broader perspective, nothing is lost at all. So when you feel lost, what is really happening? You are awakening to the fact that life is not a straight road with a fixed destination. You are realizing that all the maps were temporary, that they could never contain the mystery of existence. And while this realization unsettles the mind, it liberates the heart, for then you no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to force yourself into paths that do not fit. You can allow yourself to wander, to question, to begin again. Lostness, then, is not the enemy of life. It is life breaking through the illusions you once clung to. It is reality reminding you that the point was never to arrive, but to move, to explore, to live. To be lost is to stand at the threshold of discovery, trembling perhaps, but also alive with possibility. And notice how, in those moments of disorientation, the smallest details become radiant. When the big picture collapses, the present moment comes to the foreground. You feel the air on your skin. You hear the rustle of leaves. You notice the rise and fall of your breath. The mind, stripped of its maps, returns to immediacy. And in that immediacy, you find a strange peace. For the present moment has no need for maps. It is complete in itself. In truth, you cannot be lost in the present. Lostness always refers to the future or the past. You say, I do not know where I am going, or I should not be where I am. But here, now, you are simply here. The ground supports you. The breath moves in and out. Life continues. To drop into the present is to see that lostness is only a thought, not a reality. And when that thought softens, what remains is not despair but wonder. So perhaps, rather than resisting lostness, you might welcome it. You might see it as an initiation, a necessary stage in awakening. For who has ever truly found themselves without first being lost? Who has ever discovered truth without first seeing the failure of illusion? The very word discover means to uncover, to remove what once covered over reality. Lostness removes the cover, and though the exposure is raw, it is also true. In the end, the feeling of being lost may be the most honest feeling of all, for it admits what is always the case, that we do not ultimately know where life is taking us. The certainty we cling to is a fragile construction. Lostness tears it away and reveals the vastness beyond. And in that vastness, you may find not the path you expected, but the path you needed. When the path disappears beneath your feet, when the signs no longer point the way, and when the horizon stretches endlessly in every direction, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to discover that being lost is not an obstacle to life, but part of its essence. For what does it mean to be found, if not to have first been lost? And what does it mean to have direction, if not to have wandered without one? To feel lost is to be placed at the heart of mystery, where life can no longer be reduced to neat explanations. The truth is, you were never truly in control of the journey. You imagined that you were choosing each step, plotting each destination, and charting each course. But look closely. Did you decide to be born? Did you choose your first breath, your first thought, your first desire? Life has been carrying you all along, flowing like a river that bends and turns without asking permission. To feel lost is simply to realize this, that the river does not always follow your map, but it always flows, always moves, always carries. And so, the moment of lostness is also the moment of truth. It is the place where the illusion of control begins to crack, where you see that you are not the little navigator steering through a dangerous sea, but the very sea itself, with all its waves and currents. The loss of certainty is the birth of freedom, for now you no longer need to force life to conform to your plans. You can begin to move with it, to surrender to its rhythm, to trust that it knows more than you ever could. This is what the ancient sages called wu wei, effortless action, flowing with the grain of things instead of against it. Imagine a dancer moving to music. The dancer does not plan each step in advance, nor does she fight the rhythm. She listens, responds, allows the body to be moved by the sound. In the same way, life invites you to dance with it. Lostness is the silence before the music begins, the pause that invites you to listen more deeply. And when you do, you may find yourself moving with a grace you did not know was possible. Think of how a bird flies. It does not calculate each gust of wind, each eddy of air, it spreads its wings and trusts the sky to hold it. Or think of how a wave rises on the ocean. It does not know where it will crest, nor when it will fall, yet it belongs perfectly to the movement of the whole. To feel lost is to realize that you, too, are like the bird and the wave carried by something larger, included in a pattern beyond comprehension. You do not need to know the way, because the way is already unfolding through you. And here is the paradox. It is often when you stop searching desperately for direction that direction appears. Have you noticed how solutions come most easily when you stop trying to force them? How clarity arises not in the frenzy of thought, but in the quiet of letting go. To be lost is to be emptied of old certainties, and in that emptiness, new possibilities emerge. The openness of lostness is the very ground in which discovery grows. But what is it that we discover in lostness? First, we discover that the self we thought we were, the one who must always know, always plan, always control, is not as solid as it seemed. You believed you were the driver behind the eyes, the thinker of thoughts, the chooser of actions, but in lostness, that image crumbles. You see that thoughts arise on their own, feelings come and go, choices present themselves like waves breaking on the shore. The you who was supposed to be in charge is nowhere to be found, and though this may seem frightening, it is also liberating. For if the little self is not in control, then the burden is lifted. Life can flow as it will, and you can rest. Second, we discover that lostness is not separation, but intimacy. When the map is gone, you are no longer looking at life from above, as though it were an object to be controlled. You are inside it, immersed, woven into every detail. The rustle of leaves, the sound of rain, the rhythm of breath, all of it surrounds you, includes you, moves with you. Lostness dissolves the distance between you and the world. You realize you were never a separate traveler moving through a foreign land. You are the land itself, the path itself, the very movement of the journey. And third, we discover that lostness is not permanent. It is a season, like winter, cold, perhaps harsh, but also necessary. For in winter the ground rests, the trees shed their leaves, and what seems like death is preparation for spring. To be lost is to enter a season of dormancy, of waiting, of gestation. It is not the end, but the pause before renewal. And when spring comes, when new paths open, you may see that the lostness was not wasted. It was the soil from which new life grew. So rather than resisting lostness, we might honor it. We might see it as part of the great rhythm of existence, the ebb and flow of knowing and not knowing, of clarity and confusion, of direction and wandering. Just as day and night belong together, just as tide and trough are inseparable, so too do foundness and lostness belong to one another. Without lostness, foundness would have no meaning. Without confusion, clarity would not shine. This is why many traditions speak of the dark night of the soul, a period of disorientation and emptiness that precedes awakening. It is not punishment, but preparation. It is the breaking open of the old, so that the new can enter. And so when you feel lost, you may trust that something is ripening beneath the surface, something that will emerge in its own time. You do not need to force it, any more than you can force a seed to sprout before it is ready. You need only wait, trust, and allow. And in that waiting, you may find a peace you did not expect. For when you no longer demand that life provide answers, you are free to rest in the questions themselves. To live without knowing is not a failure. It is a kind of faith, a willingness to let life unfold without clinging. And in that faith, you may find that you are never truly lost at all. You are always here, always part of the unfolding, always held in the great embrace of existence. Look around you now. Notice the space in which these words appear. Notice the sensations in your body, the rhythm of your breath, the subtle sounds in the room. In this immediacy, there is no lostness, There is only presence. The feeling of being lost arises only when the mind insists on a map, on a certainty about the future. But here, now, there is nothing missing. The ground holds you. The breath moves. Awareness shines. In this presence, the idea of being lost dissolves, and what remains is wholeness. And so, when you feel lost, remember this: it is not a mistake. It is not proof that you are broken or that you have failed. It is life guiding you away from false maps, away from borrowed truths, toward the discovery of something deeper. Lostness is not the absence of path, but the opening to a greater path, one that cannot be charted in advance, but only walked moment by moment. You are not lost. You are the universe playing at being lost, so that it may discover itself anew. You are the wave that rises, not knowing where it will fall, the bird that soars without a fixed destination, the traveler who finds beauty only when the guidebook is forgotten. You are the dance itself, and the music, and the silence between the notes. And when you see this, when you feel it, not just as an idea, but as a lived reality, then lostness becomes something altogether different. It becomes freedom, intimacy, and trust. You no longer cling to certainty, for you see that certainty was never real. You no longer fear confusion, for you see that confusion is part of the dance. You no longer resist lostness, for you see that lostness is the doorway to being found. So let yourself be lost. Let yourself wonder, question, doubt, and stumble. For in that very wandering, life is carrying you. In that very doubt, truth is ripening. In that very stumbling, the path is appearing. And in the end, you may discover that you were never lost at all, but always exactly where you needed to be. There comes a point in every life when the applause fades, when the noise of the crowd grows distant, and you find yourself walking through a silence that feels almost foreign. At first, you might resist it. You may think that something has gone wrong, that you have fallen behind, that you've been forgotten by the world. But perhaps what has really happened is that life has drawn back its curtain so that you may see yourself as you truly are, without the distractions, without the mirrors, without the endless performance of being someone for someone else. You see, for most of our lives, we are surrounded by noise, expectations, judgments, comparisons, and we mistake this noise for meaning. We think that being noticed is the same as being alive. But there comes a moment, and it comes to everyone sooner or later, when the world stops looking at you, when you are left to look at yourself. And in that moment, you are faced with the most extraordinary invitation to discover that your worth was never dependent on an audience at all. We are taught from an early age that validation is a kind of currency, that to be loved is to be seen, and to be seen is to be successful. A child brings home a drawing and looks not at the drawing, but at the parent's face, searching for approval. A student studies not for the joy of learning, but for the grade, for the pat on the back, for the fleeting sense of being enough. And as adults, we continue this pattern without realizing it. We chase recognition, praise, applause. We mistake attention for affection and admiration for understanding. But all of this, though it feels like progress, is a subtle form of dependence. It ties your peace to the whims of others, your sense of value to the ever-shifting moods of the crowd. The tragedy is that in seeking affirmation from others, you lose connection with the quiet, steady affirmation of life itself, the simple fact that you are here, breathing, being, existing. That alone is the original validation. There is something sacred about walking through the fog when no one is beside you and no one is watching. It is in that loneliness that you begin to hear what cannot be heard in the noise of company, the rhythm of your own heartbeat, the quiet pulse of existence that has been speaking to you all along. We spend so much time trying to be understood that we forget to understand ourselves. But it is in solitude that understanding ripens. When there is no one to impress, you start to see yourself clearly. You start to notice the small things, the way your mind moves, the way your heart responds, the way life unfolds around you, even when you are not trying to control it. The silence, which at first seemed empty, begins to feel full of insight, full of presence, full of life. You see, loneliness is not the absence of others. It is the discovery of yourself in the absence of others. It is the universe saying, now, at last, you are ready to meet who you truly are. We treat solitude as a punishment, but it is the first and greatest teacher. When there is no one to depend on, you begin to depend on the stillness within. When there is no one to cheer you on, you discover that the act of moving forward is its own applause. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. The journey is the reward. Every small effort, every unseen victory, every quiet act of persistence, these are the milestones of real growth. They may not earn you applause, but they build something far greater, a quiet strength that no one can give and no one can take away. We've been taught to think of life as a competition, a ladder to climb, a race to win. But this way of thinking creates an endless hunger, a thirst that cannot be quenched. We compare ourselves to others, measure our worth by their approval, and in doing so, we make ourselves miserable. The Buddha called this craving tanha, the thirst that binds us to suffering. And the only way to end it is not by acquiring more approval, but by seeing through the illusion of needing it. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself, you begin to live freely. You realize that you were never behind, that you were never lacking. You were simply caught in the trance of comparison. Think for a moment about a flower growing in the forest. It blooms quietly, unseen by anyone, and yet it blooms all the same. It does not question whether it is worthy. It does not demand recognition. It simply fulfills its nature to blossom, to be. And in that simple act, it participates fully in the miracle of existence. The flower does not bloom for the world. It blooms because blooming is what life does through it. You, too, are such a flower. You do not need to be admired to be alive. You do not need to be seen to be real. Life itself is seeing through your eyes, breathing through your lungs, moving through your steps. The universe is aware of you because you are the universe aware of itself. But because we forget this, we go seeking mirrors. We ask others to tell us who we are, what we're worth, whether we're enough. Yet every mirror we find is distorted. People see us not as we are, but as they are. Their opinions reflect their own fears and desires more than our truth. And so, if you live for approval, you will live in distortion. You will twist yourself to fit images that were never yours, and in doing so, you will abandon your authenticity. True freedom comes when you stop needing mirrors, when you realize that you are both the reflection and the light that makes reflection possible. That is the beginning of real maturity, to become your own witness, your own source of affirmation. There is a kind of discipline that grows out of this understanding, but it is not the discipline of force. It is the discipline of love. You rise each day not because you must, but because something in you honors the unfolding of life. You take the next step, not because someone is watching, but because walking itself is sacred. You work, you create, you try, you fail, and you begin again, not because the world demands it, but because that is the rhythm of being alive. To live this way is to be free from both praise and blame. It is to see that success and failure are not opposites, but phases of the same movement, like the crest and trough of a wave. When you fail, you learn. When you learn, you grow. And growth, in its own quiet way, is success. Imagine a potter shaping clay. Each time the bowl collapses, He does not despair. He simply gathers the clay again, softens it, and begins anew. The cracks and imperfections become part of the art. In Japan, they repair broken pottery with gold, a practice called kintsugi, because they understand that the object's history adds to its beauty. Likewise, every time you fall, every time you are unseen or uncelebrated, the gold of experience fills your cracks. You become more whole, not less, more luminous, not dimmer. This is how the universe makes art out of you. The great mistake is to wait for motivation, to believe that we must feel inspired before we act. But motivation is like the weather, it comes and goes without warning. Discipline, on the other hand, is like the sun. It may hide behind clouds, but it never ceases to shine. Real discipline is not about control, it is about trust. It is faith in the process of your own unfolding. Even when you cannot see progress, something within you is maturing, deepening, preparing to bloom again. The tree in winter looks lifeless, but beneath the surface, roots are growing, drawing strength from the earth. So when your life feels quiet, when nothing seems to be happening, know that something essential is taking root. The silence you fear is not the absence of life, it is the presence of everything. Sit quietly, and you'll begin to feel it. The hum of existence, the gentle awareness that watches your thoughts rise and fall like waves. That awareness is who you are. Not the thoughts, not the emotions, but the space in which they appear. Once you see this, you realize that you were never truly alone. Even in solitude, life is with you. You are with you, and that is enough. You may wonder, what about the people who left? What about the ones who didn't see me, who didn't believe in me? But perhaps they were never meant to. Perhaps their absence is part of your awakening, a clearing of the space so that you might meet yourself without distraction. When you are no longer trying to convince anyone of your worth, you begin to live from it. You begin to create from it. You begin to love from it. And that is a power no applause can give you. To be unseen is not to be forgotten. The seed buried in darkness is not neglected. It is becoming. And when the time is right, it breaks the soil, not to prove anything, but because that is its nature. So too with you. You are growing in ways that the world may not yet recognize. You are unfolding according to a rhythm far deeper than public validation. And one day, without fanfare, you will realize that you no longer need to get ahead because you are already ahead. You are not waiting for life to begin. You are living it fully right now. So when you find yourself walking alone, do not despair. Do not rush to escape the quiet. Sit with it. Listen. The silence is speaking. It is saying, you are already home. There comes a time when you realize that being unseen has given you the greatest gift of all, space. The space to listen, to breathe, to exist without performing. Most people live their entire lives afraid of that space. They fill it with noise, with work, with chatter, with distractions. They keep the television on, the phone buzzing, the mind spinning anything to avoid being left alone with themselves. But it is only in that aloneness that something begins to awaken. Because the silence you fear is not emptiness. It is fullness so vast that your little identity trembles before it. When you stop running from it, you begin to see that everything you were looking for in the eyes of others has been looking out through your eyes all along. You see, the entire problem of loneliness is based on a misunderstanding. You think you are a fragment cut off from the rest of the world, and so you seek connection, attention, affirmation, as if these were bridges that could return you to the whole. But you were never separate in the first place. You are like a wave asking the ocean where the water went. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every thought arises from the same field of being that moves the stars. When you understand this, The idea that you are alone becomes as absurd as the idea of a sunbeam being separate from the sun. You were never disconnected, you simply forgot the truth of your belonging. The irony of striving is that the harder you chase connection, the further you drift from it. You cannot grasp what you already are. The more you reach for validation, the more you affirm the illusion of incompleteness. But when you relax, when you surrender, when you stop trying to prove yourself, a remarkable thing happens. Life begins to hold you again. It's as if existence was waiting for you to stop struggling so it could show you that you were never unsupported. The Taoists call this Wu Wei, effortless action. It is not laziness but harmony. It is the art of moving with life rather than against it. When you learn to live this way, even the most ordinary moments shimmer with quiet perfection. Washing dishes, walking in the rain, sitting in stillness, all become sacred because you are fully there. Most people think that freedom is something to be earned, that they must struggle for it, plan for it, fight for it. But freedom is the natural state of being once you stop pretending to be what you are not. You cannot manufacture freedom any more than you can manufacture the sky. You simply remove the clouds that hide it. Those clouds are made of fear, doubt, comparison, and the need for control. And when you stop feeding them, they dissolve on their own. Then, without effort, the vastness of who you are shines through. That vastness is not something you become, it is something you remember. Think of how a musician learns an instrument. At first, there is tension, effort, striving. Every movement feels clumsy. But over time, the musician relaxes into the rhythm. The fingers know what to do without thought. The music plays itself. That is what life is like when you stop trying to control it. You stop thinking about living and start living. You stop forcing and start flowing. The universe has been composing through you all along. It only needed you to stop interrupting the melody. To get ahead, then, is not to outpace others, but to outgrow your illusions. It is to see that progress is not measured by how many people see your work or applaud your journey, but by how deeply you inhabit your own being. The true success of a life is not in its visibility, but in its authenticity. The great tree in the forest grows tall, not because it competes with others, but because it follows its own light. It drinks deeply of the soil and rises effortlessly toward the sun. It doesn't ask the nearby trees for permission. It doesn't compare its leaves. It simply grows, and in that quiet growth, it fulfills its purpose. And what is your purpose? It is to be what you already are, to live this life as fully and as honestly as you can, to bring awareness to whatever is before you, whether that's joy or sorrow, gain or loss, company or solitude. You do not need a grand destiny, you need presence. Presence is life itself, paying attention through you. When you are present, even the smallest act becomes magnificent. Drinking water becomes communion, listening to the wind becomes prayer. Existence stops being a means to an end and becomes the end itself. Many people say they want peace, but what they really want is a peaceful version of control. They want the world to go their way so they can relax. But true peace doesn't depend on conditions. It arises when you stop resisting what is, when you stop demanding that the world reflect your preferences. You begin to see that life has always been perfect in its imperfection. You were never meant to manage existence, only to participate in it. When you let go of control, life begins to feel effortless. And in that effortlessness, you finally discover the very ease you were chasing all along. There will be days when the fog returns, when the path seems unclear, when doubt whispers that you are wasting your time. On those days, remember this: the fog is not an obstacle, it is the path itself. It teaches you to walk by feel, to trust the unseen, to listen for the quiet guidance that is always there beneath the noise. Every step through uncertainty strengthens your connection to something larger than thought. It teaches you faith, not the kind that clings to belief, but the kind that rests in knowing. You begin to trust the rhythm of your own becoming, even when you cannot see where it leads. Do not be afraid of being misunderstood. The deeper your understanding, the fewer people will understand you. This is not isolation, it is evolution. The higher the mountain, the thinner the air. You are meant to breathe that clarity, even if others cannot join you there. Do not descend for comfort. Rise for truth. And when the world seems to move past you, remember that stillness moves in its own way. The seed underground looks dormant, yet it is transforming. The caterpillar inside its cocoon appears lifeless, yet it is being remade. Trust your hidden seasons. The silence is not punishment, it is preparation. And when recognition finally comes, as it often does, you will smile because you no longer need it. Praise will feel like an echo of something you already knew. You will understand that the real reward was not being seen but learning to see, not being loved but becoming love, not being successful but being free. The applause, the achievements, the acknowledgement, all of them will seem small compared to the vastness of the peace you found within. So walk forward, even when no one walks with you, even when no one claps or calls your name. Walk because walking is your nature. Rise because rising is what waves do. Move not because the world demands it, but because life itself moves through you. You are not behind. You were never left out. You are part of a great unfolding, and your role is to let it unfold through you in its own time, in its own rhythm. And when doubt creeps in, remember this simple truth. The eyes of existence are already upon you. The universe is looking through your face, breathing through your lungs, living through your heart. You were never separate, never unseen. You have always been enough. The fog was never there to hide you. It was there to reveal you. When the mist clears, you will find that what you were searching for was not waiting at the top of some mountain, but shining quietly within you all along. Because the moment you stop waiting to be seen is the moment you begin to see. And in that seeing, life begins again. There comes a time, you see, when the noise of emotion fades, not because you've found peace, but because you've stopped knowing what to feel. You wake up and realize that nothing exactly hurts, yet nothing exactly moves you either. The music still plays, the sun still rises, but somehow you feel like a spectator in your own life. And that, perhaps, is the most difficult feeling of all, the feeling of nothing. You tell yourself you should be grateful. Things could be worse, you've known pain before, and this isn't pain. But the absence of sadness doesn't feel like joy. It feels like suspension. You are neither drowning nor swimming, simply floating, watching everything drift past without the strength or desire to reach for it. And so you wonder, what is this emptiness? Is it depression? Is it rest? Or is it something else entirely, the mind's quiet rebellion against constant motion? Most people imagine that life should always be vivid, that we should feel deeply, that every moment should sparkle with meaning. But perhaps that expectation itself is what exhausts us. You can't keep the ocean at high tide forever. Every wave must eventually draw back. Maybe this emptiness isn't a failure of feeling, but the space that feeling needs to return home. You see, emotion, like breath, requires rhythm. You inhale joy, you exhale sorrow, and in between, there's a pause, a still point where nothing moves. That pause is where you are now. It isn't punishment. It's simply part of the natural breathing of the soul. The difficulty is that we don't recognize it as such. We've been conditioned to believe that stillness means something's gone wrong. So when you find yourself empty, you panic. You look for reasons, you analyze, you reach for distractions, anything to avoid the quiet. But life, with infinite patience, sits beside you and whispers, "It's all right. You're not broken. You're just resting." What if the emptiness isn't absence, but cleansing? What if it's life clearing space inside you, space that used to be filled with noise, with striving, with everyone else's expectations of who you should be? You begin to see that what you call emptiness might actually be truth revealing itself, unfiltered by drama or desire. For the first time, you are not rushing toward the next emotion to prove you're alive. You are simply being. And that's an uncomfortable realization, because being, without embellishment, feels raw. You can't hide behind excitement or sadness. You can't even hide behind hope. There's only awareness, open, bare, and silent. But there is a strange beauty to that silence. You start to notice things again, the way a breeze moves through curtains, the sound of distant laughter, the faint hum of your own heartbeat. Nothing dramatic, yet somehow it feels intimate. You're beginning to sense life not as a performance, but as presence. And maybe that's what the emptiness is for, to bring you back to presence, to pull you away from the endless striving to feel something extraordinary, so you can rediscover the ordinary as sacred. Because what you call emptiness might simply be life's way of teaching you how to see without expectation, how to love without condition, how to exist without the constant need for intensity. There's a story I once told about a man who went into the forest looking for enlightenment. For days, he meditated, chanted, and searched, but nothing happened. On the fifth day, exhausted, he gave up. He sat beneath a tree and simply breathed. In that moment of giving up, he noticed the sound of birds for the first time. He noticed the rhythm of his own breath, the feeling of the earth beneath him, and he began to weep, not from sadness, but from seeing how simple life had always been. That's what happens when the emptiness is allowed to be empty. It fills itself with awareness. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to fill the silence with meaning. Just listen. The same life that once made you feel everything is still here. It hasn't abandoned you. It's simply teaching you to hear in a quieter key. Think of a field after harvest. The soil looks bare, but that barrenness is not death. It's rest. It's preparation. Beneath the surface, life is reorganizing itself. What looks like nothing is the beginning of everything. The same is true for your heart. It's not broken. It's simply reorganizing. It's letting go of what it no longer needs to carry. And when you stop demanding that life feel a certain way, you begin to understand something astonishing, that meaning was never something you created. It was something that revealed itself in moments when you weren't trying. The smile of a stranger, the flicker of candlelight, the quiet comfort of existing at all these things become enough again. So when you feel empty, don't rush to fill it. Let the emptiness be what it is. Let it echo. Let it stretch. Because it is in that space that the next chapter of your aliveness is already forming. And if you can bear to sit there, even for a little while, you might realize that what you thought was numbness was actually clarity the moment before feeling returns, the calm before understanding. You don't need to label it. You don't need to cure it. You just need to stay awake long enough to see what it becomes. Because one day soon, without warning, you'll notice something small, a sound, a scent, a fleeting thought, and it will move you again. And when it does, you'll understand that the emptiness wasn't an ending, but a cleansing. You'll laugh, perhaps softly, and say to yourself, it was never gone, it was just quiet. And that quiet, my friend, is the foundation of all joy. And so, after all the searching, after all the noise and striving and breakdowns and beginnings, you come to this quiet space. The world still spins, people still move, things still happen, but for you, something has changed. You are no longer measuring life by its emotional intensity. You are no longer chasing after a feeling to prove that you exist. You are, quite simply, here. And that, though it sounds small, is the greatest arrival of all. When you stop needing to feel something extraordinary, you begin to notice the miracle of the ordinary. the way water glimmers in a glass, the way your breath cools as you exhale, the way stillness itself hums with a presence that can't be described. And it dawns on you that what you called emptiness was never empty at all. It was spacious, vast, quiet, and alive. But we are afraid of quiet things. We're afraid of the in-between, of pauses, of the unspectacular. Because in silence, there's nothing to distract us from ourselves. The mind, used to being occupied, begins to panic. Why am I not feeling? What's wrong? But when you allow the mind to panic and still stay still, you begin to see that the panic itself is only another ripple on the surface. Beneath it, there's something unmoving, something you can't name, but that has been here all along. That something is what you are, the awareness behind the waves, the witness of both joy and sorrow, presence and absence, fullness and emptiness. You begin to understand what the sages meant when they said that the true self is untouched by the changes of the world. It's not that life stops affecting you. It's that you stop mistaking its movements for your identity. When you say, I feel empty, who is it that notices the emptiness? When you say, I'm not sad, who is it that sees the absence of sadness? That one, the quiet observer, is what you've been searching for all your life. You were never meant to fill the emptiness. You were meant to recognize yourself within it. Emptiness, in this way, becomes a mirror. It reflects back not what's missing, but what has always been. It shows you that the peace you thought you had to earn through struggle was already present in the very stillness you were avoiding. There's a certain humility that comes with this realization. You begin to laugh at how hard you tried to fix what was never broken. You see how every emotional storm you once feared eventually passed, and how each one left you a little softer, a little more open. You see how even the emptiness, this quiet space you once called void, is not against you, but for you. It's life's way of giving you back to yourself. And now, when feelings do return, when joy or sorrow comes again, they don't own you. They move through you like weather. You let them come, and you let them go. You no longer demand that life be constant sunlight. You're content to stand in the rain, because you see now that even rain has its own kind of music, its own way of washing things clean. And this is perhaps the strangest truth, that the deepest fullness often hides in what the world calls emptiness. You might notice, too, how different your relationships feel from this place. When you are no longer desperate to feel, you no longer demand that others give you something to complete you. You stop turning love into a transaction. You love people for their being, not for their usefulness to your emotional narrative. You see that they, too, are walking through their own quiet spaces, their own seasons of emptiness. And suddenly, compassion blooms. You no longer need to rescue anyone, nor do you need anyone to rescue you. You simply share presence, and that is love in its purest form. We've been taught that love must burn bright, that it must overwhelm and intoxicate. But the truest love is more like moonlight, steady, cool, and quietly illuminating everything it touches. When you sit beside someone in silence and still feel connected, that is love. When you can walk through emptiness without demanding it to end, that is love. And so, your emptiness becomes your teacher. It teaches you patience, humility, gentleness. It teaches you that nothing needs to be forced, because everything is already unfolding exactly as it must. The great paradox of being human is that we run from what we most need to meet. We try to escape silence, not realizing that silence is where we hear life most clearly. We try to escape boredom, not realizing that boredom is simply the mind's restlessness before it dissolves into peace. You begin to understand that life's invitations rarely come in fireworks. They come in whispers. They come in the pauses between thoughts, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the gentle moments when you stop insisting that things must be different. There's an immense freedom in no longer needing every day to feel significant. You start to see that ordinary moments, washing dishes, walking, breathing, contain the same essence as enlightenment. The same awareness that watches galaxies spin is the awareness that watches your hands move under warm water. And that realization, my friend, changes everything. Because once you truly see it, you can never again believe that your life is meaningless. Meaning is not found in what you achieve or what you feel. It is found in the simple act of being aware. Now, perhaps you wonder, if life is so simple, why does it take so long for us to see it? Why do we have to go through heartbreak, exhaustion, emptiness, before we understand? Because simplicity cannot be taught, it must be rediscovered. The mind is addicted to complexity. It builds elaborate theories about who you are and what you must do. It fills the silence with commentary, with worry, with endless striving. But life, in its quiet wisdom, eventually shows you that none of that noise was ever necessary. So it lets you burn out. It lets you reach the end of your strength, the end of your ambitions, the end of your emotions, until, exhausted, you fall back into stillness. And in that fall, you finally see what was there all along: peace without reason, love without condition, being without need. That's the gentle trick of the universe. It hides itself in the very places you're most afraid to look, in silence, in loss, in emptiness, knowing that when you finally stop running, you will see that it was never gone. And when that realization sinks in, you don't just understand it intellectually, you feel it. You feel that everything is made of the same essence. The sound of the wind, the beating of your heart, the passing of time, all of it woven from the same thread. You realize that emptiness isn't the absence of life, it's the canvas upon which life paints. And from that moment on, you no longer need the highs and lows to feel alive. You can sit in the quiet and smile, because you know that even in stillness, you are surrounded by the miracle of being. There's a kind of maturity that comes with this seeing. Not the seriousness of age, but the softness of understanding. You become less interested in proving anything, less in a hurry to arrive anywhere. You begin to treat your own emotions like weather, beautiful when they come, but never personal. You find yourself saying, "Ah, here is sorrow," or "Ah, here is joy," and watching both with equal tenderness. And this, I think, is the essence of freedom, to be so deeply at peace with change that nothing can truly disturb you anymore. It's not indifference. It's intimacy. You are no longer resisting life. You are touching it directly. Even your emptiness, when it comes again as it will, becomes a kind of friend. You recognize it, welcome it, let it sit beside you. You no longer ask it to leave, because you know it is only life rearranging itself once more. And slowly, the great mystery of all this begins to reveal itself, that what you are looking for has never been elsewhere. The wholeness you seek was never lost. You were simply looking through the eyes of longing rather than the eyes of being. In the end, the journey from sadness to emptiness and from emptiness to peace is not about changing your life, it's about waking up to what has always been true. That even in the moments when you feel nothing, life is still holding you. That even when you feel detached, you are still deeply connected. That even in your quietest hour, you are still the sound of the universe breathing. And maybe, when all is said and done, that is what Alan Watts was trying to tell us all along. That awakening is not about feeling more, it's about needing less. It's the realization that being empty is not the opposite of being full. It's the same thing, seen from the other side. The fullness you've been searching for was never out there. It was always in the quiet, waiting for you to stop searching long enough to hear it. So if you're not sad, just empty, take heart. You are not broken. You are being made spacious enough to hold everything. Because when emptiness and awareness meet, That's what we call awakening. There comes a time, after all the seeking, the meditating, the searching for answers, when something peculiar happens. You wake up one morning and realize that you simply don't care to go on improving yourself. The drive that once pushed you forward to become better, wiser, more enlightened, seems to have vanished. It's as though the wind that filled your sails has suddenly stopped, leaving you adrift in a vast and silent sea. And for many people, this feels terribly wrong. You see, we are trained from birth to believe that life must always be about progress, that we are here to grow, to strive, to push upward toward some imagined summit. Even in spirituality, this same mentality sneaks in through the back door. We meditate to get somewhere, to reach enlightenment, to become pure, serene, and wise. But then one day, you notice something has changed. You no longer feel that fire. You no longer have the same hunger for books, for teachings, for goals. And immediately, the mind begins to panic. It whispers, something has gone wrong. You've lost your way. But has it? Or could it be that you are, for the first time, standing still long enough to feel where you actually are? What most people call a lack of motivation is not the failure of the path, it is the flowering of it. It is the moment when the seeker begins to disappear, when the very energy that once fueled the search dissolves because there is no longer anything to seek. You see, the self that wanted to awaken was part of the illusion all along. The ego was wearing the mask of a saint, pretending to strive for transcendence while secretly feeding on the idea of progress. And when that mask falls away, when the show is over, the ego dies, and with it, the constant need to fix, improve, and achieve. Of course, to the mind, this feels like death. It says, what's the point now? If nothing needs to be done, what am I supposed to do? But that question itself is the echo of the old pattern, the assumption that life must always have a mission, a reason, a grand meaning. The truth is far more subtle, far more ordinary, and because of that, it often feels empty at first. Imagine you have been climbing a mountain for years, sweating and struggling toward a shining peak. Every step was driven by the belief that when you reached the top, everything would make sense. But when you finally arrive, you discover there is no temple, no secret waiting, no grand revelation, only the wide, silent sky. The mind doesn't know what to do with that. It expected fireworks, angels, transformation. Instead, it finds stillness. And so people come down from the mountain thinking something went wrong. I lost my motivation, they say. But what they've really lost is their illusion. They've discovered that all along, the journey was not about arriving anywhere, but about seeing through the need to arrive. This is why, after awakening, many people feel detached from ordinary life. The games they used to play, success, improvement, ambition, no longer hold the same charm. The taste has gone out of it. They find themselves watching the world continue its restless movement and wonder, why doesn't it feel real anymore? But this detachment is not apathy, it is clarity. You are seeing through the play, not rejecting it. It's like watching a drama on stage while knowing it's only a performance. The difference is, you no longer take it so seriously. You no longer believe that you are the character struggling for a happy ending. And yet, this clarity can be disorienting. The ego thrived on purpose, on doing, on effort. Without those, it feels useless, naked. It begins to whisper, you've lost your spark. You're becoming lazy. But what is laziness? It is a word we use to condemn stillness. We have been so deeply conditioned to equate motion with meaning that we cannot imagine that doing nothing could be intelligent. Consider nature. The tree does not strain to grow, it unfolds. The river does not push itself to flow. It moves because of gravity. The clouds drift, the seasons change, and not one of them needs a motivational quote to do so. Their being is their doing. They do not divide the world into progress and stagnation. They simply are, and that is enough. So when you find yourself unmotivated after awakening, it may not be a problem to solve, but a lesson to learn. Life is inviting you to rediscover a deeper rhythm, one that does not depend on the whip of the ego. For the first time, you are allowed to rest, to breathe, to exist without striving. And that can feel terrifying because it's so unfamiliar. The mind, when faced with stillness, becomes restless. It begins to invent new goals. Perhaps I should start manifesting. Perhaps I should find my life purpose. Perhaps I should help others awaken. These are subtle disguises of the same old game. The ego does not care what it's chasing, so long as it's chasing something. But awareness has no need to chase. It watches the play of desire rise and fall like waves upon the sea. It doesn't resist them, but it doesn't follow them either. It sees that all movement, even spiritual movement, happens within the same vast stillness that you already are. This is the irony of awakening. The moment you realize that everything is already it, you also realize that there's nothing left to do. And that's precisely when the human mind feels most lost. It craves projects, definitions, purposes. It asks, but what now? As though existence itself were not enough. You must understand, motivation belongs to the realm of becoming, but awakening belongs to the realm of being. The two operate on different frequencies. When you awaken, the machinery of becoming winds down. It doesn't mean you'll never move again. It means movement will no longer be born of lack. And perhaps that is the true lesson. Before awakening, you act because you believe something is missing. After awakening, you see that nothing was ever missing, and so your actions change their flavor. They become spontaneous, effortless, playful. But before this natural action returns, there is often a long silence, a spiritual winter. In that winter, you may feel uninspired, tired, or disconnected. But don't try to fix it. It is not a mistake. It is a cleansing. The old motives are dissolving so that new, purer ones can appear not from the mind, but from life itself. Think of it like the stillness before spring. The ground looks barren, the air cold, the trees lifeless, but beneath the surface, everything is quietly preparing to bloom. In the same way, when your motivation disappears, your being is preparing to act again, not from compulsion, but from harmony. The secret is patience. Let yourself be still. Let the silence do its work. You don't need to invent meaning. Meaning will return on its own when the time is right. Because, you see, true purpose is not chosen, it's revealed. It's not something you plan, but something you notice. And it always arises when the ego has finally grown quiet enough to hear it. So if you find yourself drifting, don't panic. You haven't lost your way. You've simply stepped off the treadmill of constant doing. The world may call it laziness. Wisdom calls it awakening. Be still long enough, and you will see there is nothing wrong with the absence of drive. It is the space through which a new kind of energy begins to move, one that does not push, but pulls. Not ambition, but inspiration, not pressure, but peace. And in that peace, life begins again, not as a project, but as a play. There is a moment after the long silence of awakening when life begins to move again, but it no longer moves the way it used to. The old urgency is gone. You are not driven by hunger anymore, yet somehow things still happen. Conversations appear, paths open, actions unfold. It is as if existence itself has taken over the steering wheel, and you are simply being carried. This is what the ancient sages called wu-wei, effortless action. the art of doing without forcing. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means allowing the natural rhythm of things to move through you. When the ego stops interfering, when it stops shouting, "I must," then life begins to act on its own behalf. You may notice that you start to do things not because you should, but because they simply feel appropriate in the moment. There is no debate, no inner argument. The same way a bird doesn't plan to sing and yet sings, you find yourself speaking, creating, walking, helping, without any agenda behind it. Action becomes spontaneous, graceful, almost playful. At first, this can feel strange. We have spent so many years measuring worth by productivity that spontaneous action seems irresponsible. But in truth, the most natural work is done by those who have nothing to prove. When you are no longer seeking meaning, your every movement begins to express it. Think of the musician who stops performing to impress the crowd and instead plays for the sheer joy of sound. The melody that emerges from that state carries a depth no effort can produce. That is the same energy that returns after awakening, not ambition, but participation. You see, the problem with motivation, as the world understands it, is that it is always conditional. I must act in order to become. I must improve in order to deserve. But existence doesn't demand this bargain. The tree does not grow in order to earn sunlight. It grows because it is sunlight made visible. In the same way, when the illusion of separation fades, action becomes the natural radiance of being. When you realize this, life begins to flow again. Not because you make it flow, but because you stop standing in the way. You discover that inspiration arises like breathing, effortless, cyclical, renewing itself moment after moment. Yet even here, the mind sometimes returns with questions. If all is effortless, what about responsibility? What about discipline, goals? The world that still needs building. But understand, Wu Wei is not chaos, it is order, deeper than control. It is the rhythm that runs beneath both rest and movement. The river does not need discipline to find the sea. Its path is shaped by the very landscape it flows through. Your life is the same. Every bend, every still pool, every rushing drop, all are guided by the larger terrain of existence. When you trust that, you realize that the flow never truly stops. It only changes tempo. Of course, there will still be days of confusion, days of fatigue. Enlightenment doesn't erase your humanity. It deepens it. The body still grows tired, the heart still feels loss, the mind still wanders. But now you see these not as obstacles, but as part of the music. There is no need to fight the downbeat, for it gives meaning to the rise that follows. When motivation seems to fade again, smile. It is simply another tide turning. Rest when you rest, move when you move. The universe breathes through both. Something beautiful happens once you stop chasing constant growth. Gratitude begins to appear. Not the gratitude that says thank you for this blessing, but the quiet awareness that every breath is a blessing. When you wake up and realize you need nothing, everything you touch feels sacred. You begin to notice how even the smallest things shimmer with significance. The sound of a kettle, the shadow of leaves, the warmth of sunlight through the window. These were always there, but the noise of striving kept you from hearing them. Now, without the noise, life itself becomes your meditation. And from that simplicity, creativity returns. True creativity is not born from effort, but from emptiness. A cup must be empty to be filled. When you stop trying to produce meaning, meaning pours in. You might paint again, write again, work again, but the energy behind it has changed. It is no longer a performance. It is communion. This is why great art, great love, and great wisdom all arise from surrender. They come from those who have ceased demanding that life makes sense. For when you stop forcing it to be extraordinary, it reveals that it always was. So, you see, Motivation after awakening doesn't vanish forever, it transforms. It shifts from personal will to universal will, from I must to it moves. You become the instrument through which life plays its tune. Some days it's gentle, some days wild, but every note belongs. If you watch carefully, you will notice that everything around you already lives this way. The stars do not compete for brightness, each shines where it is. The waves do not envy the tide, each rises and falls in perfect timing. Even the silence between sounds is part of the song. To live like this is not to escape the world, but to see it clearly for the first time. You don't retreat from life, you melt into it. Work still happens, relationships still form, choices still appear, but they are lighter now, more fluid, less desperate. The strain is gone, and with that strain gone, a different kind of joy arises, not the explosive joy of victory, but the quiet joy of belonging. You realize you never had to conquer the world to find peace. You only had to stop fighting with it. In the end, what you called losing motivation was simply life changing its direction within you. You had been moving against the current for so long that when it finally turned you around, you mistook the ease for failure. But the current knows where it's going. It always has. So when you feel empty, remember, emptiness is not absence. It is space for new life to flow through. When you no longer rush to fill it, that is when the real work begins, the work that is done effortlessly, silently, perfectly. And one day, without planning it, you will notice yourself moving again, not because you decided to, but because the moment called for it. A friend will ask for help, a project will appear, a spark will rise. You will respond naturally, joyfully, without question. That is motivation after awakening, action born from stillness, movement rooted in peace. The paradox of it all is this: when you no longer need a reason to live, life gives you 1,000 of them. When you stop searching for purpose, purpose reveals itself in every gesture, every breath, every sunrise. So do not be troubled if your fire seems dim. The flame has not died, it has become light, and that light needs no fuel, it shines by its own nature. Rest in that knowing, act when it moves you. Trust that the same intelligence that turns the stars and blooms the flowers is guiding you now. You have not fallen off the path. You have simply arrived where the path was always leading, here in this unhurried now. Have you ever noticed that the more you try to figure life out, the less you seem to understand it? You sit there, head full of thoughts, tracing circles in your mind, trying to make sense of everything, what to do, what to say, where to go, how to become who you think you should be. You believe that if you could only think a little harder, if you could only solve the puzzle, peace would finally arrive. But the harder you think, the farther peace seems to drift. Because the mind, for all its brilliance, is a terrible place to live when it won't stop moving. Overthinking is one of the quietest prisons in the modern world. You can't see the bars, yet they surround you. You can't hear the locks, yet they click into place every time you question yourself again. What if I'm wrong? What if I fail? What if I make the wrong choice? The mind loops and loops, convinced that control will bring safety, unaware that control is the very thing causing its suffering. You become trapped in the illusion that understanding more will make life easier, when in truth, life only feels heavy because you keep trying to carry it with thought alone. There's a strange irony here. The same mind that creates the problem is the one you rely on to fix it. You keep asking the overactive mind to think its way out of its own confusion, like asking a storm to calm itself by blowing harder. It's an endless cycle analysis. Doubt, reassurance, then more analysis again. And though you tell yourself you're being careful or responsible, what you're really being is afraid. Fear hides behind thought. Every overthinker is at heart someone trying to feel safe. You don't want to make a mistake, don't want to be hurt, don't want to lose control. But the more you try to avoid pain by planning around it, the more you live in the shadow of it. Life becomes one long rehearsal for a moment that never comes. You're preparing to live instead of living. And so, your mind keeps spinning, always revisiting the past, always predicting the future, rarely allowing you to be here, in the only place life actually happens. You might sit at a cafe, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling through the window, yet your body is the only part of you that's present. Your thoughts are somewhere else entirely, chasing what-ifs and should-haves. You've forgotten what it means to simply exist. The problem isn't that you think. Thinking is beautiful when it's used as a tool. The problem is that you don't know how to put the tool down. The modern mind has become addicted to solving. It treats every sensation, every emotion, every uncertainty as something to fix. But not everything broken needs mending. Some things are only asking to be felt. Imagine standing by a river. The current is strong, and you drop a small leaf into it. You watch as the water carries it effortlessly downstream. That's how life moves when you stop resisting it. But if you try to catch the leaf, to control where it goes, the moment you grab at it, you disturb the water. The surface ripples, and what was once simple becomes messy. Overthinking does the same. It disturbs the current of being. You've likely noticed that the best insights, the most peaceful moments, come not when you're trying to think your way toward them, but when you've finally given up. It's when you stop struggling, when you let go of the mental tug of war, that clarity suddenly appears, like sunlight breaking through clouds that were never solid to begin with. But most people don't trust that process. They believe that letting go means becoming passive, lazy, or careless. In truth, it's the opposite. Letting go is the highest form of intelligence. It's the moment you stop trying to make life obey you and instead begin to listen to it. Because life, like music, was never meant to be figured out. It was meant to be played. Think of how you listen to your favorite song. You don't analyze every note or measure. You let it wash through you. You feel it, and that's why you enjoy it. But when you turn life into a problem to solve, you lose the melody. You start dissecting beauty instead of dancing with it. Overthinking blocks the life you want because it builds a wall between experience and awareness. You can't taste a meal while describing it in your head. You can't love deeply while questioning whether you're doing it right. You can't live fully while narrating your every move. The commentary becomes louder than the life itself. The truth is, your mind will never think its way into peace because thought is born from division, from the sense of me and the world, this and that, should and shouldn't. Real peace can only appear when that division ends, when you stop seeing life as something to manage and start seeing it as something to meet. When you are caught in overthinking, you live in delay. Every moment is postponed until the next decision is made, the next question answered. But life doesn't wait for conclusions. It unfolds now. It moves with or without your permission. You can spend your entire life preparing for it and never actually meet it. Some people spend years waiting to start, waiting until they feel ready, confident, healed, certain. But readiness never arrives in the way they imagine. Certainty is not the gate to life. It is the grave of possibility. The more you demand to know before acting, the smaller your world becomes. To live freely, you must be willing to not know. You must dare to walk without a map. Because the truth is, the mind can only plan based on what it already knows, and what it already knows is too small for what life wants to give you. The overthinker never leaves the circle of familiarity. They keep spinning inside the known, terrified of stepping into the unknown, unaware that the unknown is where life actually begins. What if the life you want is already here, hidden beneath the noise of your thoughts? What if the freedom you seek is not somewhere in the future, but waiting quietly beneath all the analyzing, the worrying, the self-questioning? What if the only thing separating you from peace is the belief that you must earn it through understanding? At some point, every overthinker reaches a breaking point, that sacred exhaustion, where the mind finally admits defeat. You can't think anymore, you can't plan anymore, you've tried every angle, every solution, and still, life doesn't obey your designs. And in that surrender, something miraculous happens. You stop fighting, you stop thinking your way out, and for the first time, you simply breathe. In that breath, the fog begins to lift. You realize that the peace you were chasing wasn't hidden in answers. It was hidden in stillness. The answers were never the destination. They were the distraction. What you were searching for was not knowledge, but silence, the kind that doesn't come from solving, but from seeing. To overthink is to live half a life, to exist in potential but never in presence. You wait for a perfect understanding that will never come. Meanwhile, life waits for you to return to it. When you finally do, when you let the noise fall away, you discover that you were never truly lost. You were simply too loud inside to hear the quiet truth beneath it all. That life does not need your permission to unfold. It only needs your attention. And when that attention returns to the present moment, even for a breath, everything shifts. The problems shrink. The noise softens. You realize the river was never against you, it was carrying you all along. There comes a moment, somewhere after the storm of thought has exhausted itself, when silence doesn't feel like emptiness anymore. It feels like home. You sit quietly and realize that all along, the noise wasn't protecting you, it was hiding you from yourself. You thought thinking would make you stronger, safer, wiser. But now, in the stillness that follows all that effort, you see that wisdom was never waiting inside your thoughts. It was waiting beneath them. The mind believes that if it keeps running, it can outrun fear. But fear is not behind you, it is the very motion of running itself. You can't escape fear by thinking faster, planning harder, or knowing more. The more you run from uncertainty, the more it defines you. True peace begins when you stop trying to outrun life and instead allow it to catch up with you. Overthinking is a symptom of mistrust. You don't trust life to unfold without your supervision, so you hover over it like a nervous parent, constantly correcting, anticipating, preparing. But the beauty of existence is that it doesn't need to be managed. The flowers bloom without being told how. The stars move without instruction. The heart beats without your permission. You are part of that same intelligence, yet you spend your days doubting it. You might say, if I stop thinking, I'll make mistakes. But mistakes are part of the dance. They are not interruptions, they are steps. Every so-called mistake you've ever made was life moving you toward something you couldn't yet see. If you look closely, you'll notice that some of your most painful wrong turns became the very paths that revealed your strength. Overthinking tries to prevent mistakes, but in doing so, it prevents growth. To live without overthinking is not to live without thought. It's to let thought play its proper role as a servant, not a master. When a thought is needed, it arises. When it's done, it dissolves. The problem is not in thinking, but in identifying with the thinker. When you believe you are your thoughts, you drown in them. But when you see that you are the awareness noticing them, suddenly they lose their power. They pass through you like clouds across a vast sky. To rest in that awareness is to see thoughts for what they are, temporary movements in something much larger, much quieter, much freer than the mind. Once you begin to live from that space, life stops feeling like a problem to be solved and starts feeling like an experience to be lived. You no longer wake up with the need to control every outcome. You start to notice the subtle rhythm that runs beneath everything, the way events unfold, the way timing seems to align when you stop forcing it. It's as if life had been waiting for you to stop interfering. This is where real intelligence begins. Not the kind measured by speed or logic, but by depth, by the ability to listen. The universe is always speaking, but most people can't hear it over the noise of their own analysis. When you quiet down, the guidance you were searching for begins to emerge naturally, not as a voice from above, but as intuition, a quiet knowing that moves through you like wind through leaves. You don't have to think your way into it. You simply allow it. You trust that life, like breath, knows what it's doing. You inhale, you exhale, and everything takes care of itself. Overthinking says, I must make life happen. Awareness whispers, life is already happening. And the difference between those two is the difference between struggle and flow. There's a certain magic in surrendering to that flow. You start noticing how everything connects, how every person you meet, every obstacle you face, every moment of doubt or delay fits into a larger tapestry that the mind could never have designed. Overthinking reduces life to fragments. Awareness restores it to wholeness. You begin to see that nothing was ever missing. The job you didn't get, the person who left, the opportunity that slipped away, they weren't mistakes. They were movements in a pattern too vast to grasp from where you stand. Overthinking tries to flatten that mystery into a straight line. But life is a circle. Everything returns in its own form, in its own time. When you understand this, you begin to relax. You begin to breathe differently. You stop asking life for guarantees and start meeting it as it is. That's when the overthinking mind finally dissolves, not because you've conquered it, but because you've outgrown it. You've learned that control is a poor substitute for trust. And here's the great paradox. When you stop trying to control everything, things actually begin to align. Not because the world suddenly bends to your will, but because your will no longer resists the world. You move with life instead of against it. You act not from fear, but from clarity. This is what people mean when they talk about flow, that effortless harmony between doing and being. It's the artist painting without self-consciousness, the athlete lost in motion, the child playing without purpose. It's the moment when the watcher and the watched become one. And the beautiful part is that it's not rare. It's not reserved for special people. It's the natural state of being that overthinking has simply obscured. Once the noise quiets, you realize the stillness was there all along. The mind will still whisper from time to time. It will still ask, are you sure? What if this goes wrong? But now you see those questions for what they are, old echoes of a self that believed it needed control to feel safe. You can smile at them, thank them for their concern, and move on. The mind becomes a companion rather than a captor. Eventually, you come to see that life's wisdom was never hidden in complexity, but in simplicity. You don't need more certainty. You don't need more answers. You need less noise. Peace is not something you find after thinking through every possibility. It's what remains when the thinking stops and awareness begins. It's what arises when you no longer stand between yourself and life. So when your mind starts spinning again, when it replays old conversations or rehearses endless outcomes, pause. Don't fight it. Just notice it. Watch the current of thought without diving in. Feel the body breathing, the heart beating, the presence underneath it all. In that moment, something ancient wakes within you. You remember that you were never the storm. You were the sky. And the sky does not need to stop the storm to remain at peace. It only needs to remember its own vastness. This is the essence of living beyond overthinking, not that you control the mind, but that you no longer confuse yourself with it. You let thoughts come, you let them go, and in between, you live. You finally live. Because the life you've been trying so hard to figure out was never waiting for you to think your way into it. It was waiting for you to feel your way back into now. And when you arrive, really arrive, you realize that life had never gone anywhere. You were the one lost in thought. The river never stopped flowing. You just stopped trusting it. And now, you can float again.